Welcome, VeigarV2, coach for Cloud9 LCS, and professional coach as well for solo queue players, anyone who really wants to improve at the game, analyst. I mean, you do a lot of things, but why don't you introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of background on your history, how you got started with everything, and what you do now.
Yeah, sure thing. My name is Marius, aka Veigar, in-game, and I've been playing League since Season 3. Just like anybody else, I started in Bronze. I built 6 Doran's Blades on Shyvana, because I did not know that you could turn component items into full items. And yeah, it was really bad. And just was maining Veigar from Season 3 to Season 6. At Season 6, I started getting like high elo, like up until Challenger and stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna do something with this game. Tried going pro, didn't really like the coaching structure and stuff. So I was like, maybe I should try coaching myself, and the rest is history. So ever since like Season 6, Season 7, I've basically been coaching like just individually ERL teams, like basically the European version of the collegiate for NA and like the amateur scene in NA. So coached a bunch in EU with that, then ended up in EU LCS, now LEC, and now LCS.
That's awesome. So when you said you started in Bronze, yes, well, most people start in Bronze, but how long did it take before you said you got Challenger in Season 6? Was your climb steady, or was it kind of like this jump?
Well, I was Bronze 2, I believe. Bronze 2 or Bronze 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I ended Plat the next season.
Okay.
But I was stuck in Bronze the whole Season 3.
Okay.
My improvement was always like, I was Bronze, then I was Bronze for that whole season, then I got Plat, and then I was Plat for like almost the whole season, then I got Diamond, then I was Diamond for the whole season, then I got Master. So I always had this, like, I was stuck for a while, and then I would quickly improve. Because, I don't know, I just always think, in general, I have a good way of just improving and just teaching myself, which I think translates into coaching. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. So the methodology that you use to improve as a player should allow you to then be able to translate that to teaching other people how to learn themselves, right? That's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's kind of deviate over a little bit to the pro side. So do you right now, for those who don't know, you work indirectly with or directly, but from a distance with Cloud9. What's that been like, for the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I've been with C9 now for I think about 3 years, something like this, 3+ years. Like I said, I work remote, but I wouldn't do something that I think would harm my team in any way. So I think I'm more than capable of helping the team through remote. For me, there is no issues. I don't think the team has an issue with it either. Otherwise, wouldn't be going on for 3 years, right? So
no. I think it's also a huge just sacrifice on your end too. I mean, your schedule is all over the place, right? Because I know I've heard you in team meetings at 8 p.m. for them, so it must be 3, 4 in the morning for you. Like,
yeah,
that's
I mean, for sure. But the thing is, I'm also in Norway, so in the winter, you can't really tell what the time is.
Ah, true.
Because if it's like 5 p.m., it's completely nocturnal outside, and if it's 4 a.m., it's also nocturnal. So it doesn't really matter. In the summer, yeah, it can suck a bit, but I mean, I have always been competitive, not just in League, and I mean, I want to win, and I think winning the LCS right now is my goal, so.
Yeah, again.
Yeah,
got a few of those.
Again. I got a few of those, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, though. And I think one of the things I've always appreciated in seeing how you work with players is the focus on constant improvement, constant perfection. Like, it's never, hey, we won, great. Good job. It's like you acknowledge it, you win, and then you move on, keep improving. So what are some of the things that you find when you look at in players? Do you first of all, do you work with any scouting with the team, or is it more the GM side? Okay. So
yeah, I mean, like for scouting, like I mean, I always kind of been scouting because I've also been head coach back in like ERLs myself, and had to do scouting then too. And I mean, you're you're naturally scouting, even if you're not looking for players, you're always kind of scouting because you're always looking at leagues, right? Like as a coach, you're looking at LEC, you're looking at LCS, everything. And also like I watch like everything. Like I will watch German Division 3, I'll watch the NA Academy, like collegiate, everything. You're always kind of scouting
Mm-hmm.
in the back of your mind. But for C9, like MNS, for example, like I always thought MNS did really great in ERLs.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Blabber then talked to him and yeah, thought it would
Mm-hmm.
be a good fit. And I mean, he played really well.
You won a
And
championship.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, but you're always kind of scouting, I think, even if you're maybe not even a coach, if you're a player yourself too on a team, you have an idea, right? Who's up and coming, who's good, who to look out for.
Do you feel like you have a slight advantage there too? Because I'm sure a lot of high elo players reach out to you to get improvement and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you also get to play versus them too.
Yeah, true, true. And that's another that's an area that I talked to LS about last time in the other interview. But you might have a different take on it, right? In terms of how high an elo do you think is required to be a good coach?
So you mentioned earlier how since I can teach myself, it can transfer into teaching others.
Mm-hmm.
And so my take is that with coaching, right, being a coach is a very broad term. It
Mm-hmm.
can mean a lot of things. Like a coach can simply be a guy that schedules things, sets up scrims, and just facilitates discussion.
Right.
And if you're that type of coach, you don't necessarily need to be a high rank. You do need some fundamental like game knowledge so you can have a flow in reviews. Um, but you can be a people's person coach, and then I don't think you necessarily need elo.
Mm.
But what scares me a little bit is when somebody that I don't really know about or hasn't proved himself in any way tells me that they are a good gameplay coach and then they're also like low elo. It's like I don't really get it because I feel like if you're playing the game and you're a coach,
Yeah.
you should be able to get decent. I understand maybe not challenger, right? But you should be able to get Diamond 1 master just for teaching yourself if you're gonna teach others, right? Like it shouldn't take that long time. Um, but yeah, to me, it just kind of depends what type of coach you are. I think fitting the role that I'm kind of doing, I think you have to constantly play the game
Mm-hmm.
and update yourself. Like right now, we're in a completely new season, right? And
Yes.
like 2 weeks ago, I was just as clueless as everybody else with the new
Wow.
items, and I had to discover it. And playing yourself is a great way. And if you're not able to play the game well, then it can be hard to really see if the things actually are good.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're playing in bronze or silver, anything can work, right? And it can be hard to really tell how good is this really gonna be. So, but yeah, to like TLDR, I think if you're a person that facilitates, you don't need really elo, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna be a positional coach, like gameplay coach, I think every coaching staff they need a like people's person, like somebody that knows how to work with people, and you're gonna need some gameplay guy that guy can back up on, right?
I
Like
agree.
he
That
can lean
that's
back on,
yeah.
right?
That's always kind of been my take on it too. Is that the head coach doesn't necessarily have to be the strategic or the positional coach, but
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of teams they default to one coach or a head coach and an assistant coach.
But I do
Yeah,
think it helps a lot though. I do
absolutely.
think the head coach,
Yeah.
like I do think even though the head coach doesn't need to, I think he absolutely should
Mhm.
because I don't think it takes that much time if you're actually smart about the game to get good. Like these days, I don't really even like play the game that much compared to before. Like these days, I play like 2 or 3 games a day.
Mhm.
Like, but when I was grinding, I would play like 10 plus every day,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I still always like I hit challenger at least once every season.
It's wild.
So and I
I've
don't.
always respected that work ethic that on your end because you also you have to play things you don't necessarily enjoy playing.
Yes, like you feel a lot and your roles.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, it's just part of the job. Like I just wouldn't feel comfortable teaching if I am not sure about what I'm saying, and
Hmm.
I think being ahead of the meta and stuff, and like just figuring out new stuff is always something I've liked. Just historically, I've always just tried to figure out like, okay, sure, this is good. What else can be
Hmm.
good? Like, what can beat this that is good? And
Hmm.
finding it out myself and playing it has always been the right way. Then you can also argue back to the players more.
Hmm.
You know?
Well, one of my favorite things to see from you, and I haven't seen it in a while, is the discussions that you get into with other high elo players or coaches about item builds or about optimal, like strategic decisions in game. I love that stuff because the debate between two high low players helps me understand both sides because I can see both arguments. So I really wish more people would engage in that kind of discussion online.
Yeah, the only problem with those discussions sometimes is you always get like some random people joining in, and then they just start getting really toxic or something.
Yeah. That's what I'll mention too. Is just you get flamed and all this stuff, but it's like when you keep it to the facts, right? Like look at this damage number, look at this damage number, and they can challenge it with, okay, well, did you set your MR? Is this a realistic? Putting a target dummy is very different than hitting something in game, right? To some extent, yeah. So it's always interesting to see like the different takes on it because at the end of the day, what you really want is to create thought. You want to have people discuss and think about it. Just challenge the thought process.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have discussions, you're gonna have a very like narrow-minded view. You're only gonna be in your own bubble. I mean, the thing is, like, League is played by millions and millions of players, right? That are in different metas, different elos, and I always have the take that, like, I'll listen to anybody. Like, the head coach I was talking about, that he could be bronze, I'm still gonna listen to him. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna, like, believe what he's saying or trust it, Like, but I'll listen. Well, I'll think about myself, like, does this make sense? Does he have a point?
Yeah. That's something that I've kind of struggled because a lot of times people will throw elo out there as a means of saying you're wrong, when it doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. It just means that you're probably less correct frequently than someone who's higher elo.
I was gonna say that too. Like, doesn't mean you're wrong all the time, but you're more likely to be wrong. That's why I would always be skeptical if a gameplay coach is like stuck in gold while playing the game. It's like.
Yeah.
But I just don't see how it's like possible that you know a lot but you can't perform it, because you really don't have to perform things like that great to be like at least diamond.
Sure.
Yeah. So I have had discussions with gold players where they actually point out a thing where I'm like, well, that's actually true.
Yeah.
Because the thing is as well, like when you get to higher elo, you think of the game in a very specific way. And then sometimes like gold players, they have this funny idea or this funny play where it's like, I've never thought about that, but I think this case you can actually do this.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I've actually had this discussion when I've gotten coached in the past with other people is the right play may not be the right play for the situation. Because if, let's say your jungler's pinging dragon and you want to take a back, it's a good timer, but the wave is shoved, you have prio. If you just back and then they get jumped and die right before they finish dragon, they're going to lose their minds. And if you had just gone and helped them auto 3 times, they'd be dead. Like little stuff like that. Yeah,
but it also depends how bad is it for you and can you sacrifice your teammates, right? Because I think like in the elo of gold, you can 1v5 like if you really play good enough, in most cases. So it's like if your team is committing to a bad Baron call, yeah, you should follow. Even though it might be the wrong call, you should follow because you lose the game if your team dies. But if your team is doing first dragon at 8 minutes,
sure.
You can afford to let them like die there if it would cost you your individual game,
That makes sense. Yeah.
But obviously I get what you're saying, and yeah, I agree. Like there's times where you have to do something like stupid to win a game, and
yeah. What do you and coaching all these solo queue players, and we'll talk about solo queue for a little bit. What do you think is the number one thing holding most people from hitting diamond?
I think just the ability to improve. Like if you are looking to hit diamond, you've played the game for a while. Most people that are looking to hit diamond, they play the game. Like, of course, some people, they were good in other games and they come to League, they hit diamond in like 2 months, 3 months. That happens to some, but not many.
No.
So you play the game for a long time and you're struggling to hit diamond, you need to recognize how you can improve. Like, I'm not going to say, oh, you need to pick this champion, you need to play like this, because you might already be doing those things. Like, that it's impossible to know how a guy is playing. But if you're stuck in your elo, then you are not realizing what you're doing wrong. So you really need to take a step back, right? Yeah. And just take a step back, open your replays, look at 10 games, get a notepad, and look for habits, look for patterns, what's going wrong, right? You don't want to focus on, oh, I lost this game because I failed my Baron smite here.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to get outsmited once every 10th game, doesn't matter. What matters is, oh, my recalls gets cancelled every game. I gotta fix that, right? Yes. I always screw up teamfights. I get flanked every time because my camera control is bad. I gotta fix that, right? Pattern recognition, like, is so important. Like, if you want to improve, you must focus on the things that is hurting you the most and most often.
That makes sense.
But a lot of people, they tend to focus on very small things that might not happen frequently. So it's not as important. Doesn't mean it isn't important. You should for sure write it down and keep it in mind. But at the end of the day, if you're looking to get diamond, there's something massive holding you back.
That makes
Not a
sense.
bunch of like small things. It's mainly major things. Like at least for me, when I spiked right from bronze to plat to diamond, it's always just figuring out like major things. Like simply getting from bronze to plat was just farming minions, you know?
Yeah, I was about to say it's like every rank separation, there's like usually one consistent problem. It's like same thing for me. It's like from going from silver to gold, all I had to do was die less. And then going from gold to
Yeah.
plat was like, okay, well I just need to farm more. And then now I'm in plat and I'm stuck again right now, but the season just started.
Yeah,
But
so you need to figure out
yeah.
what that is. I
And
can't tell you. So
I think
play.
I think I already know, but I'm gonna have to go through and VOD review and do some more stuff, more work. And that kind of
Yeah.
ties into my next question would be then when you're looking to improve, what do you think should be the percentage of time spent playing, VOD reviewing, and then watching other people or other content to try to learn how to improve?
Well, watching others, I always suggest to people when they don't know what they're doing wrong. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when you're not capable of watching, like, when you watch your own gameplay and it simply doesn't tell you anything,
Mm-hmm.
then I think it's useful to watch others. But if you already know what you're doing wrong, it's not so useful to watch others, I think.
I
Because what are
see.
you looking out for then? Seeing them do a mistake that you aren't focusing on isn't really that useful, you know?
Well, I was
Like, you
thinking more
should.
like I watch a lot of like let's say challenger Swain players because I play mostly Swain.
Mhm.
So if I watch a challenger player lane against a matchup that I really struggle with, I can be like, oh, how should I be laning? Because sometimes when I do it, even if I make a bunch of mistakes, I actually don't know what optimal should look like. You know, it's like I don't know, should I be pressuring early or should I be playing conservative early or you know. So I think sometimes you can at least get an idea of like, oh, this lane should go like this, and then I can try to implement it.
Yeah, for sure. But that ties into, like, when it comes to practicing League,
Mm-hmm.
you can, within a game, you can practice multiple things. But not if they're inside of the same time schedule in the game. Like, what I mean by
I
that
see.
is you can queue up for a game and you can practice laning phase
Mm-hmm.
while also practicing your mid game side laning, while also practicing your late game team fighting. But what gets hard is like if you want to start practicing your mid game side laning while you're thinking about your like mid game team fighting and your mid game whatever,
Mm,
it gets a lot added up on top of each other, right? So if you want to practice your laning, but at the same time you want to practice your map awareness in lane, that gets really tricky because if you're having bad map awareness, you can't focus on lane.
right.
If you're learning to watch a map, it's just impossible because you have to frequently tell yourself, I should look at map now, I should look at map now. Doing that while you're thinking, okay, I click here, I play like this, I do this, that's hard. So I would say one
Mm,
step at a time still and be like, fix your map awareness first, then go and learn your laning.
okay.
So it'll just be like easier. But it doesn't hurt to watch a matchup in Q or Champ Select, you know, like you're in Champ Select, you see, oh, I'm Swain versus Yon, haven't played a matchup in a while. You go look it up. Yeah, no
That's
problem.
but
But
that it's funny. That's like one of my worst matchups. I never ever win against Yon ever.
yeah. But like I don't think that should be your main focus, you know. Next
Yeah.
game you're not gonna be versus Yon, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah.
But the goal that you had in mind to focus on probably will happen again and again and again since it was your goal, right?
Yeah.
So
So would you
yeah,
say
to me
that's
it's just like
the hierarchy of order then? Would you say like map awareness, playing around the map itself, macro, and then looking at lane matchups,
I mean I
or
think map awareness just outvalues macro on the map. Just it's just important. Like you can't make decisions without understanding the map.
okay?
Like if you want to trade aggressive in lane, right, and you
Yeah.
have no info of enemy support, enemy jungle, you're playing
Hmm.
mid lane, you're gonna get roamed on by enemy pike, you know?
Yeah.
You're gonna get ganked level 3 by Xin Zhao. So
Hmm.
if you don't have map awareness, no clue where jungle is, where it started, how can you even tell if your trade is good?
Right. That makes sense. And then
So
when you're coaching
yeah.
high elo players, like so Diamond Plus, right? Some people say Masters, GM Plus, whatever. Higher than Diamond. What do you say? What would you say are the biggest issues for those players generally?
So like I said with like diamond players, right?
Hmm.
It's usually just a massive thing they're doing wrong. Now with higher level players, it's completely different in my opinion.
Hmm.
It's a lot of small things that they didn't think about.
Hmm.
So that's where more nitpicky stuff starts to happen, where some of the players, especially like LCS, LEC pro players, they might be like, yeah, but this is so small, no? And then I always tell them like, yeah, are you bad? Like, what do you want me to tell you? You know, like, does he
Yeah,
expect me to say like,
yeah,
oh yeah, you're having this major flaw. By the way, you're the best mid in the LCS. You know, like,
yeah, yeah.
right? So it's like, sure, yes, it's small, but these are 10 small things that
Hmm.
you as a pro player are doing wrong,
And
and they will give you an advantage over these other pro players. I cannot tell you a major thing you're doing wrong in most cases because you are good enough to not do it,
right.
right? A pro player is not going to do the same mistake a diamond player will do, right? Obviously. So it's more of a lot of small things that adds up. Um, or it can just be other things not necessarily tied to their role. Like
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of like teaching players how to be coaches themselves because
Mm.
I think that the best players that I've ever like had on teams has been the people that can lift up their own teammates and teach them, right? You
Yeah.
see Faker get sick, T1 plays like shit.
Yep.
Faker's there, scrims for 2 weeks, now all of a sudden they're insane.
Yep.
I would like to believe that he's also on the side coaching his players, right? After the game, he's like, here at 8 minutes, owner, you did this and this and this was really bad, blah, 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 you should do this and this instead.
Hmm.
That's really good. Um, I had a year where I was on TSM in 2020, and Bjergsen was really good at this. And I
Hmm.
really like this about Bjergsen. This is also why he was really good at Zilean, in my opinion, because Zilean was so unskilled that he could just play Zilean and micromanage people.
Yeah. Not
But
a, yeah.
a lot of players there will be like, yeah, but it's not my job, no. I'm like, I'm a top laner, I shouldn't do this. I'm a AD carry, I shouldn't do this. And it's like, sure, if you wanna limit yourself, right? Yeah, you know, like if you're happy where you are. But the best players in the world, they play League. It's a 5v5 game, right? It's a MOBA game. You can control your teammates. You're on voice with them. You want to get better. That's what you do. You lead your team. You coach them.
Who else
So
are some of the best coach players that you've worked with?
I mean, I don't want to single people out, but yeah, like Bjergsen for sure. Like he's
Yeah.
retired now,
Yeah.
so I'll happily say Bjergsen.
Hmm.
But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
sure. And so is that a culture that C9's trying to kind of emphasize as well? I know a lot of players work together in duos, stuff like that. Is that something that you've and other coaches have tried to push with your squad?
yeah, for
Like,
sure,
yeah,
for
like
sure. Just
like Blabber teaching someone
yesterday.
else more about jungle pathing, stuff like
Yeah, no,
that. Yeah,
literally Blabber. Like
yeah,
literally yesterday in scrims, it happened. So
yeah.
like Blabber was having a situation where Jojo didn't like completely understand something about jungle, and then Blabber was teaching him.
That's great.
And
Yeah,
this is super important. And in my opinion, you shouldn't even be a pro player if you're not able to do that, right? Like
hmm,
you're playing a team game, and if you are a good player, your teammates should become good
yeah.
if they want to win,
And
right?
so that probably creates issues with teams that have communication differences, right? So if you import a couple of Korean players who maybe don't speak that good of English, and you have a bunch of players who are trying, you basically can't have that sort of interaction to the level that you would if they all can communicate very effectively. Do you think that's like an issue with some of the, some of the issues that other teams have had, some of the teams have had with import players and mixing and matching?
Yeah, for sure. But also like culture fits and personalities, right? It's very
Hmm.
different.
Yeah,
You need to understand when you're being given feedback, right? You need to believe and trust that the guy is talking in good faith, right? That he
sure.
means the best and he wants you to win and wants to win with you.
So
It goes for
when,
coaches giving feedback too, right? So
yeah,
like if you're going to a new country, new location, new house, right? New people you've never spoken to, and they start telling you how you're bad at the game basically, right? Maybe not those exact words, but they're basically saying that. You might feel bad, right? Probably a lot of expectations put on you as well, right? Since you're being imported. You might feel bad. So just important really that everybody believes and understands that we all want each other to win. Some might give feedback a bit more harshly than others, right? But at the end of the day, we are all competing and want to win, right? Like I've had and seen players that they would be more strict with their feedback, but it's not like they're cursing you out,
right.
They just
Not
tell you
flaming.
how it
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing as long as the personality of the other guy can handle that.
right.
Some people cannot, and then you need to adapt.
Sure. Like, do
That
you
goes as a
know
coach too.
do you kind of know these traits when you look at scouting players? When you try to bring players in, is that something that comes up a lot in that process?
Of course, you think about how these players would work together, right? And ideally, if you've scouted a player, you also kind of know how they work within a team, like what
Mhm.
they've done before, how they tend to work under stress or when they're performing poorly. Because it's super easy to coach a team that's like doing well and everybody is happy. But then when shit hits the fan and you're doing shit, right? You had a 0-3 week, you
Yeah.
still need feedback. You
Yep.
might even need it
Yep.
even more.
Absolutely.
And so you're gonna need players that they are gonna be able to take that.
Yeah. And what are some of the things that when you scout players you think are incredibly valuable or rare traits in players? Because I also really love that sometimes I'll see you on Twitter call out certain ERL players or certain amateur players like, oh, this player is going to be really, really good. And it's
Yeah.
always interesting to see like what it is about those players that you highlight.
So I'm gonna go back to the ability to learn and improve.
Mm-hmm.
Like APA is one of these.
Mm-hmm.
That's like super recent, like JoJo in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's been like more in LCS, right, than APA. But APA is one of these players. One, I think, if you've been a one trick, right? He was a one trick ASOL. I don't know if you know that, but he
Mm-hmm.
was a one trick ASOL like pretty long time ago. And I think that if you are a one trick and you transition into pro play, and you so quickly get high win rates and other champions, and you learn all these abilities and new things, new matchups so quickly, right? You were a one trick. You were playing your own video game, and now you're
Mm-hmm.
playing the real game. You learn that so quickly. You must have good ability to learn, right? And you must be open minded. Whereas a lot of players, they've kind of been doing the same thing for years and years and years, and then it's kind of like, why haven't you had your shot yet? You know? Then you gotta ask yourself that question. Because a player like APA, he didn't have his shot because he's so new, right? But if you've been like stuck for a while and stuff, then it kind of just you look at like, okay, so why haven't they had their shot? Have they just been unlucky off seasons? Because that happens, right? Some players are so good they're stuck in amateur or whatever for so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they just didn't have their chance because unlucky off seasons they got scammed in the contracts or they got
Right.
just they got promised an offer but a better player came, right?
Well, yeah.
Gotta look at that too.
And
But yeah, for
how do you feel about the whole idea? You know, there's a lot of talk outside of the league about nepotism in the league and how certain players keep getting shots. I've always thought about it more as like, well, when you look at like, let's say, I hate throwing individual names out, but like Wild Turtle has been getting, you know, more LCS shots in the past than some of these amateur players. Everyone's like, oh, get an amateur player, but he actually performs, so he might just be outplaying some of these newer players potentially. Or what do you think is some of the issues with, you know, previous LCS players kind of cycling through academy multiple times and then coming back in?
Mhm. Well, nepotism is for sure real in the scene,
Yeah,
but it's everywhere. No,
sure. Yeah, it's a
like
like
at
fact
the
of
end of the
life.
day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If I was a head coach and I'm choosing my roster and I'm choosing my coaching staff,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I would think is, well, who do I know, and are they worth it?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't choose people strictly because I know them, but I will for sure think about them
Yeah,
because I know what they bring, right? Like, if I'm certain that this will give me this and this, and I need that, then why wouldn't I go for it, right?
right.
If I need a jungler that does X, Y, and Z, and I know I have that with this one player, but then this other player comes along, and I don't know if he has that, and I don't even know if he's better. Why would I choose him,
Sure. Yeah,
right?
it's
I just so
high
happen
risk,
to
high
know
reward.
the other
Yeah,
guy,
yeah. But
right?
then
So it's like
well, do
you're
you
going
worry
to
though?
trust, huh?
I say, do you worry though that like players have ceilings? Like, is there a limit? Like, if you're used to a player being a certain way, you know he can do these things. Do you think that they can surpass that, or is it like, well, they're safe. We know that they can hit this level, and
Well, I
that's
think
what
that
we want.
depends on the rest of your roster then,
Mm.
because if, for example, if you look at LEC right now,
Hmm.
right? You know the Mad Lions roster. Have you seen it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So their bot lane is super good.
yeah.
I played versus those guys in solo queue for a long time. Their top is very experimental player, and their mid is like good,
Hmm.
and they have stable jungler. So
Hmm.
if I was to do that roster, um, I would personally not go for rookie mid.
Yeah,
I would go for a more stable mid.
yeah,
Not saying that guy is bad, he's good, but I would go for stable mid jungle, and then I could risk it on the top and the bot, because like I said, you want room to grow too, right?
yeah.
There's players that they are super good right now, but that does not mean they're gonna get better,
Right.
and you also want to improve, and you don't want people to be complacent, right? So it just depends what your roster needs. Like, Jankos is always a player that's referred to as being very stable. It's just you know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
And that's great on a roster where you don't know what you're gonna get. Right?
Right. So you want to have some volatility maybe in one of the solo lanes then or somewhere else where you could like I think of C9 as a good example. Right? So last year's roster, you have rookie mid in M&S. You have sort of a rookie bot lane, but a very, very high skill ceiling. And so you know you have a stable top, you know you have a stable support, you know you have a very stable jungler, very good jungler actually. So it's sort of it covers the potential weaknesses while allowing the potential strengths to pop up, right? Is that you kind of don't want you don't want 5 rookies. I mean, everyone and for some reason everyone's like in NA thinks that's a good thing. Oh, let's get 5 amateur players together, like NA talent. I'm like, that sounds like a disaster.
Yeah, it sounds super hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Just with just the pressure alone, like it's good to have somebody comforting you and you know you can like trust and listen to. Like if you have 5 rookies on the same team, and then let's say you play a match, you lose or whatever. Who's gonna comfort them of the players? Nobody's been there before. Like no guy's gonna be like, "Don't worry, bro. In 2021, when I played here first time, this happened to me."
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, it's just about the nepotism thing. Like I'm always gonna think I know this guy. It also comes with like joining teams yourself. Like there's like times where I have offers from like 2 or 3 teams, and it's like, well, this one roster, I know these players,
Yeah.
and I know I can work with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not just about getting picked because people know you. It also goes you choose rosters yourself too because you know you work well with the people. Why would you risk a whole year or your career on a team that you don't know?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because you never know. Like next split could be your last. You know.
I mean, we see it all the time right now in esports. Is it's very, very cutthroat. You have one bad year, and all of a sudden your reputation is you're a loser. And
yes,
it's really, really tough. I feel bad for a lot of players, especially amateur players, when they come in and they get their first contract. I usually tell them, if you're going to go to a bottom 5 team, you have to be really, really conscious, like about what that might be.
Yeah, like you're going to show, and you might play good, but you know, like
Yeah.
that doesn't mean your team will. And when you look, you'll be the guy that was playing amateur for 4 years and now one split LCS or whatever, and goodbye.
Yeah, it's
Right?
really tough. It's really tough. And on that note, then, what do you think are some of the things that you would suggest that LCS needs to do to catch it? Like, let me ask this. So, LS had an interesting take about the East versus the West. What do you think, as a person who's actually been in the trenches coaching against some of the best teams in the world? What is the major, I guess, block that we have in the West? And I'm lumping LEC with LCS here, in competing against LPL, LCK here, like internationally.
Yeah. I mean, you said yourself, right? You're putting LEC together with LCS. I think that's fair. I think for the last couple of years, LEC has like even at times been worse than LCS. Like
As a whole, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. I mean, the West compared to the East as a whole is just not doing well. And I think one, it's attention to detail. In the East, just even in solo queue, the amount of attention to detail that the players just put in, they just grasp concepts that is like unheard of. Like if you just talk to a random challenger or grandmaster player over there in the East, they will bring up concepts that other like challenger top 50 players just haven't thought about. Their attention to detail about the game and just understanding on how to capitalize on things like tempo, like lack of vision, like how you place your vision, your CDs, everything. It's just next level. How you get to that point is willing to review and consider these factors, which a lot of players in the West just aren't. Like I said, some people will be like, this is a really small thing, no?
All right.
Right? That's a very classic response when you bring up something nitpicky. Whereas I feel like in the East, that's the norm. That's how they always learn to get advantage because you want to get better, you want to get better, you want to get better.
That's actually very surprising to me because in any other pro sport, any other pro sport, the little things are what coaches focus on. It has to be the little things because that 1% improvement is massive over a large scale time. Yeah.
That's always how I see it. And I think stuff like team fighting and just everything combat related to the game is a lot better.
Sure.
In East. Again, just going to the attention to detail, like positioning on dragons. Like they just call these things out just better. They see it better in reviews. Yeah, how you get there, it's tough because I mean your solo queue is obviously worse, so your gameplay examples to go by and your own practice is worse.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't help that people aren't really practicing it and trying to get better at it. A lot of people. I had this interesting idea that got tested out a little bit in C9. I think it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've always been a fan of like, sure, you can scrim 5 games or free and break and free, right? You can do this. But just like with football and other things, at some point you're gonna need drills, in my opinion.
Yes.
You know?
Yes,
you're,
absolutely.
You're gonna need some form of drills. And I thought like, Jesus Christ, we suck at team fighting. There's always one guy just either not flanking when he should, or there's one guy just like diving in, or there's 2 people hitting backline when other guys diving in. Just people aren't on the same pace. Like the AD carry isn't creating space when he should, which is like, if you look at the East AD carries, you watch them play Saya or Lucian or something, they are frontlining. You know, they are playing aggressive. They are the ones engaging. They're getting engaged onto. Right? When Seri was meta and people picked Vi into it, in the East, Vi didn't counter Seri because the Seri would frontline and dash on a large wall and bring the Vi to like Africa, you know? Like just bring him across the map. And it's like people in EU and NA didn't do that until they saw it on replay. So I thought it would be a good idea, like at 20 minutes, 25 minutes, when the game is starting to be like whatever, why don't you just pause and just cycle through team fights? You know? So like, imagine this, right? Both teams are even gold.
Yeah.
And you're screaming, you're playing to improve, right? Baron, whatever has happened, you've had a Baron sequence. Why don't you now, when everyone has free items, why don't you just meet on midwave, play to get prio like a normal situation? You're allowed to engage on each other if you see an angle. Then whoever gets mid prio, they move into river like a normal situation. And you just fight. After the fight, you all just reset, you don't buy items. You do it again. And again. And again, and again, and again. You should be able to get like 6+ team fights in like 10 minutes easily. and then you can just FF the game or go next.
Yeah, why? So are other teams just not willing to do this?
I mean, we did it versus our academy team, I think. It worked. It worked good one time. Other time it was like cringe because the guy stepped out of the bush when he shouldn't. It's just one of those things. You need a lot of buy-in from the players because it's so against the norm of what they're used to.
This is always I've been saying this for a long time. Is that academy teams should function like this? They should be your scout team. You should be able to use them to better prepare against opponents rather than just thinking of them as like, oh, it's a separate team that we might promote a player from or something. Yeah, I think that's really smart, and it also highlights the issue with League of Legends, professional League of Legends in general, which is we don't have a sandbox mode. Imagine if you didn't have to play the first 20 minutes and you could just set that scenario up, set your gold, like just like in practice tool, set your items, set your gold, set your levels.
Possibilities in the game would be insane.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that was implemented somehow because everything would be, you would see the skill level disparity match a lot sooner because it would overcome a lot of the issues that we might have with solo queue.
Yeah. And then like other drills, like I thought there was some metas where you would get the dove every time level 3 on top lane. And it's like we could run some 2v1 drills just so you can like practice using your cooldowns better, you know, like let's say you're playing Jax and you know that in this matchup you will get dove at 3rd wave every time.
Yeah.
So if you get to practice using your E correctly and all of this, maybe you'll be able to perform better. And it's just one of those things like maybe it doesn't help you at all. Then it took 15 minutes to try.
No, I mean, maybe, I don't think there's any way you don't improve doing that. Like anything in life, you do it 25 times.
Let's say you don't. let's just say you don't improve at all, and it was a complete waste of time. Well, now you know, and it took you 15 minutes.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
If you're a professional player, should be down to try that.
Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff that I think is useful to at least try, especially at the start of the year. Now that you're like trying to set things up right, you're trying to start the year. That's the best time to try. Like once you start getting into playoffs and the year starts to end, it's like you're running out of time at this point, and those 15 minutes actually could become useful.
Yeah.
And also starting to change the players' like norms and systems at that point can maybe make them uncomfortable and stuff, and
right.
add some unneeded stress. But at the start of the year, like huge fan of trying to find out new ways to
Mhm.
practice. So yeah.
Well, I think that's really, really, it's all about efficiency, right? The efficiency of time. If you have 40 minutes, is it better to do one scrim? Which honestly, and I've seen enough pro scrims to know, like game 4-5 is a nightmare. It almost no learning is
Yeah, you're
occurring
not
in
even
game 5.
screaming.
Like they're just you'll see one team lock in a troll comp and they'll just run it in 15 minutes, and it's just trying to get out. So that time could be better spent doing 2v2s, 1v1s, like that kind of stuff, situational drills. I think that would be so much more beneficial, and it also helps prevent burnout because I think grinding league, a lot of the burnout comes from the fact that you might be thinking, oh, I want to work my mid game, but you have to get through the first 15 minutes every time. And so I think doing the laning when you know you're trying to work on this other thing is just so inefficient for time that it'd make more sense to be able to in 50 minutes we could run the same scenario 20 times and then be done. You know.
Yeah. So like another that ties into like another idea I had for the team fighting things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was thinking like legit the managers or whoever at the house
Yeah.
could just set up the 10 computers,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
People have said
have
that. Yeah.
the just have you stand AFK hitting some camps and stuff and get just spawn into the game with free items and then
Yeah.
just drill like 20 team fights straight.
Yeah.
Um it's like I think you can be creative like that if you just try.
Sure. I mean,
But keep in mind, like, right, you need coaching staff on the same side, you need 10 players on the same side too. And from my experience, it's often like one or two players or somebody doesn't like fully understand it, and you need buy-in, right? You need
yeah.
everyone to be on the same page and truly believe that this could be useful. Because
Well,
all it takes is one person, right, to be like,
yeah.
I don't think this is useful, and then it's just wasted.
It's really tough though because it's not unique. That whole idea, like you said, this is not unique. This is what every other sport does. This is what every other
Yeah,
skill
that's where I
does.
got it from.
Yeah,
Like,
you have to do drills. Like, and what's interesting, it's specific to League because you look at Valorant, you look at CS:GO, they drill constantly. They're always running situational drills. It's sort of
yeah.
normalized. They'll practice
I
their
mean,
entries.
I don't play soccer or football or anything,
Yeah.
but like, I watch like coaches do like reviews and stuff of it
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, and just how they're training, just to
Mm-hmm.
get like insight of it, because I do think you can take aspects of it into league.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, it's interesting for sure. Um, but yeah, like if you don't have an academy team to do it with, then you need an even larger challenge, which is to get the other LCS team to be willing to do it too.
Yeah.
Because then you also have the problem of like the enemy LCS team might be like,
Mm-hmm.
well, why would we help you practice? We don't need team fighting practice. We are fucking good,
I would argue that every LCS team needs team fighting practice.
Yeah, but I mean, this is what happens, Like this is a real thing.
Yeah, I know, and it's tough because like that's always why I said scrim culture as a primary means of practice is also something you don't see in any other sport or game. Like it doesn't make sense. Like scrimming being the primary form of practice is inherently inefficient because the amount of time invested is not always going to be rewarded. You might get, I've seen. Okay, maybe you have thoughts on this too. When you have a scrim, right, and someone tries a level 1 invade and it goes really well for them, they kill 3 people. Do you think they should play out?
If the team that's invading gets the thing,
Yes, or any team, right? If it goes horrible, they try level 1 invade. You guys counter it. You had a good ward. You kill 3 of them. Do you think you should play that out?
yeah, I think so. Even though you
Yeah.
might think it's useless.
I agree because what happens when that happens at Worlds? You have to play
exactly,
it
and it
out.
does happen.
Yeah.
To me, it's always like on the topic of like remaking. It's just a question of like what did you intend to do and what ended up happening. Like, if you're playing to invade enemy raptors, and enemy just outplayed you, you should play it out because your intention was to fuck them over in early game, and you failed.
Yep.
So there has to be consequences. But if you're playing like an early game draft and enemy gets a kill that like it's not like real, like it's just something the most troll thing ever happened, I think you can remake.
Sure. Yeah.
I think remaking isn't always bad. But yeah, like if you're playing Pantheon Draven bot lane and you're playing to Snowball and you fail your 2v2, then it's like you're just trolling,
Yeah.
Like,
So
you should get punished.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But it just feels like I think a lot of times teams. I've just seen enough teams, not just C9, but enough teams will basically FF or like remake a game where it's, you know, they're only down by so much, but or they start kind of just limit testing and then it becomes a game where it's impossible to play. It always didn't make sense to me when you think, well, how many times are we in that situation in a real match? You know, it happens all the time, right? Teams always play from behind. One team always has to play from behind.
Yeah, but it's also about the culture, in my opinion. That if you're too forgiving, right? You're like, yeah, you can remake. Then I feel like the players in the back of their mind are like, I'm gonna go for this play. If it goes wrong, we can remake anyways.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't. You should have to play that out.
Like, that's not a good mindset to have.
No.
Remaking is something that you should be lucky to be granted. Sure. You should not be ever thinking of the possibility to remake.
Right.
But then you have games where you load into the game and, you know, some guy has wrong runes and it's like, sure, just remake.
Yeah,
you know,
like, that's different.
That's that could still happen on stage. It could,
right,
but that's like so unlikely to happen.
It's rare,
like,
yeah.
If Blabber spawns in and didn't buy items and starts hitting his red buff, right? Like we should remake.
Right.
Like even though that did happen to a guy at MSI, I think it was.
Yep. It was loud, right?
It's just it's just too troll to play a scrim.
Yeah.
With a jungler not having item.
Right.
So if that does happen on stage, I'll just gladly lose instead of practicing that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so I guess when it comes to other LCS teams, do you think any other LCS teams are thinking about practice and improvement the same way? Like, are they, or are they sort of, would you say more teams are kind of falling in the same line of let's just scrim 5 times a day, just keep trying to work on it that way? Or do you think that more teams are starting to show signs of thinking outside the box? Like, how do we make our practice more efficient? Because we're never going to catch China, we're never going to catch Korea without increased efficiency at this point, right? We don't have the hours. We don't have the solo queue.
I have a positive answer because I know for a fact they actually are. Like, we are like 2v2ing a bunch, 1v1ing a bunch.
Okay.
And the other day we actually did have an LCS scrim try to like a blitz scrim us.
Awesome.
You know?
Yeah.
So it is happening. It's just some teams and some players don't want to help each other.
Sure.
Not gonna name names, but yeah, that's kind of like we're all shit, you know. Like we all benefit from playing each other, and like also like even if you might be the best right now, what happens then 4 to 5 months later when you're not the best, right?
Yeah.
Like then we're just not gonna help you then, or what? Right?
Yeah. So, what are your predictions? Obviously C9 number 1, so we drop that out. But what are the teams that you're really looking at thinking being strong this split?
I think FlyQuest.
I agree. I like FlyQuest roster a lot. Inspired, I think he took a year off so people forget how good he is. Yeah, I think he's gonna bring a lot to that team.
Yeah, I think FlyQuest TL.
Yeah, great. And then what are some players that you think are up and coming right now that maybe are outside of LCS that you have an eye
on? Both EU and NA or just NA?
We can talk about EU as well.
For EU at least, I think for top lane, I think Melonic. You probably have not heard of him, but he's Polish top, I believe. He's quite good, smart about the game. I always thought Jack Spectre is good. He had his chance in LEC.
Yeah.
Played like shit half of his game, so he got replaced, sadly, but he'll get there next time. He's not bad, and I think I always liked Random as a mid. He's an ERL player, just like his name. His name is Random, and he just plays a bunch of random champions. You know, like the guy just plays like Ilaoi mid, Garen mid, Sack mid. You know,
which are actually so strong in solo queue. Like,
yes, and they can be in competitive play on like 4-5. But yeah, like this is kind of like, again, to go with like the scouting thing. Like when I look at players, it always makes me smile when an AD carry player can play mages. It always makes me smile when a mid plays top champs. It's just like, I know that already he's at an advantage in terms of like learning, because it takes skill to learn all these different champions and then also keep up in elo, and that is probably going to translate into other areas of the game that you could learn.
Now, I'm curious
So
why we don't see more of that being drafted. I know LCS started drafting some of the Garen, they started drafting some of the off meta picks, but like I think a lot of the players in a lot of the teams have these one trick or pocket picks that we see a lot in amateur. We don't see it as much in LCS. We don't see it as much in LEC as often anymore. Why do you think that is? Like, is it just because it's best of one? You don't want to potentially throw a game, or
no, I think I can answer this super precisely, honestly.
Mhm.
But I would rather screen share
Oh,
this. I think.
okay.
One sec. I'll make sure I don't leak anything.
You get the entire C9 draft board up here.
Yeah. So you were asking why do we not see funny drafts, basically, right? Why is it only SE or why is it only virus, right?
Mhm.
That was your question, right?
Yes.
And so it's a lot of things. First thing is the picks that often gets played, they're actually good. Like Azir is not a bad champion. Vars is not a bad champion. Fucking Aatrox top is not a bad champion.
Uh-huh.
So that's first thing. First, we have to agree on this. But that does not mean they're the only champions. But because by far they're not. There are good champions. The problem that I've occurred from my like 5-6 years now of like coaching teams is that pro players, right? Let's take Power of Evil for example. Okay, Power of Evil, you know him?
Yep. Yep.
All right, he plays Asir, Orianna, and Syndra basically, right?
Hmm.
And Victor, he plays Control Mages. Okay, so a player like that, he probably blind picks a lot, right? You can blind Asir, no problem, right?
Hmm.
So these champions that people want to see, you can often only pick them in last two, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's first thing. That means you get to practice them less, correct?
Sure.
Okay, that is the first hinder. That still doesn't excuse it, but just explaining, right? So let's say Anivia. I think Anivia is a good champion. I think it was 2020. I drafted Anivia twice in LCS for
Yeah. It,
Jensen.
it was broken when when you
Yes,
guys.
it was completely broken.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why I only drafted it 2 times.
Hmm.
Because it's broken in the right situations.
Correct. Yeah.
So the problem a lot of players have is that because they most of the time will blind pick a seer, they don't see a reason to practice the other things, which is wrong because there is a reason, but they don't want to really because they are more likely to pick the others because the others are also good champions, but they're more blindable.
Mm.
But then the discussion becomes, this is always like my argument, like you've played a seer now 1,000 games,
Right.
right? You played a Kali 1,000 games. How much better are you truly going to get at this champion compared to playing 10 games of Anivia so that you can take 2 free wins in the right draft?
I
You know?
agree. I agree.
So that's always my take. But yeah, this is why pro players don't play funny champions. They just don't
Well,
see it realistic, and some people are just simply scared, and some are unable to even recognize that the champions, except for the meta, are actually good until they start getting played by others.
yes. And
In 2023, Kassadin started becoming pick and ban and OP tier. Everybody started to play it.
Mhm.
Rumble was OP for a while, and now he is meta completely, but he was OP for a while and people didn't pick it. Nautilus mid. G2 started to play it.
Mhm.
Senna Nyla was played in ERLs for a long time, and then T1 picked it at Worlds, at the end of Worlds.
Mhm.
And so this argument that, oh, this can't be good because then it would be played in pro play. How does that argument even make sense in
No,
the first place?
that's yeah.
Because it has to start somewhere. Somebody had to pick it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So like a seer at some point had to be picked first time by somebody.
Mhm.
So this was played in ERLs for a long time, way before T1 played it. So yeah, I think people fail to recognize that champions are good before they get played. People don't want to put in the time to learn the champions because they don't think they are likely to play them. which is true. You're not likely to play them, but you will at some point.
Sure.
And so to Jensen, like, we had this discussion, and I told him, like, you have played this game for 10 years. You played Anivia in, like, 2018, 17, whatever. The champion has not changed. It's the same combos, same mechanics. You play 10 games on the champ, you will play it good. You're a smart player, you will play it.
Right.
And he agrees, and he understands that, yeah, they have Olaf Talia, they can't play versus Anivia.
Yes.
So if your player can accept that and put in games, you'll see funny and new champions.
But it also increases your ability to draft OP champions in other roles, because if you don't have to blind Azir, now you can first pick your ADC. You have all these other options now.
Yeah, but then the other problem becomes then enemy gets Azir.
Sure.
Then what do you do? Because, like I said, I don't think the champs that are picked are necessarily bad.
Right.
I just think that when you R5 Aatrox, it can be bad, because at R5, the funny champions might actually be fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, you can blind pick Aatrox and ban 2 champions or whatever, and you'll be fine. Sure. You blind pick Darius with 2 bans, you often might not be that useful. And if enemy draft shifts on 4-5 and they end up with a range-heavy draft, Darius might not be so good. Right. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of champions just in top lane alone, where there's tons of like these funny champions that can be good in certain spots, and it's just like just needs the right angle. Like in the past, Yorick got played by G2 in Worlds, and they completely stomped the East with it. So
that makes sense.
So yeah, it's just you just need to understand the champion's purpose, why you want it drafted, right? And what its purpose actually is, and then look for those angles in draft.
Adam made Darius look completely broken last Worlds.
Yes, but then the argument you can make about Adam is that it's the same argument about a pro player playing 1,000 games of Azir. He has 1,000 games of Darius.
Yeah.
Your pro player playing Darius will not look like that, right?
Sure.
So then you got to factor in.
Well, and I think after people started seeing it, he got kind of just dumpstered playing Darius too. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like kind of like, how will a 10-game Darius look like? Because Darius is also really like, those 10 games might not be enough, because you really need the limits. For Darius to have value, you need to make a lot of things happen in early game and in your lane and in your 1v1s. And his damage numbers are kind of tricky to understand, because his passive is damage over time. So it's kind of hard to calculate if you're not in a lot of scenarios, right?
Makes sense.
So yeah, but like in your case, for example, like Swain, you play Swain. I don't know how you feel with new items, but I think Swain is OP right now.
I was about to ask you. I think I haven't found the optimal setup. I have a couple builds that I like, but he is OP in the right situation. Swain's he's kind of like Veigar. He's a champ that really struggles if they have a ton of range. So he
is like Veigar, just that Veigar is shit right now, but they fit the same theme.
Yeah.
But yeah, Swain right now is OP, but he is in the similar tier as Anivia, where he is OP in the right cases.
Right.
If enemy has like Akali and Vi and they're diving onto you, Swain is OP, yeah.
Yep.
But if enemy's locking in Azir, you can't play Swain.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, for his setup, I think Conquer with Rylai's Malignance is pretty good.
Do you like
Malignance?
Malignance?
Go Rylai's into Liandry into Malignance too.
Do you, do you like Malignance over Riftmaker?
No, but if you go Rylai's into Liandry, you're saying you want to be tanky, right? So then you would go Riftmaker third. But if enemy is like super tanky and you don't need the tankiness, then you can go for Rylai's and Liandry and Malignance.
Okay.
Because Malignance should just out-damage with your ulti, then Riftmaker. And at the end of the day, you're talking about damage, right? Riftmaker gives 10% damage when it's fully stacked.
Yeah.
Malignance reduces MR and adds another bleed that perma refreshes with your ulti, right? So
Right. Yeah, and actually,
Swain is so happy with the item changes. Like Liandry getting HP, for example, so good for him, you know?
Yeah, it loses the mana. I've had a lot of issues with mana this season for some reason, but I don't know why. It doesn't feel, they didn't change the numbers, but it feels like I'm constantly out of mana. Maybe because I'm fighting too much, but
I mean, you don't have mana in Liandry's if you're building that before, I don't know.
Well, that's what I mean. I used to have mana on Liandry's and now I don't.
Yeah, so then that explains why you are going.
Well, but yeah. But I'm saying, like, even if I built, because I was rushing Malignance first to get the mana, and it just didn't feel great. Not sure why, but I also think that right now with the new item changes, I really do like Leandry's feels very strong right now, and I didn't think it was as strong damage wise last season for whatever reason. This season feels like it just does a ton of damage. I haven't looked. I'll be honest. I haven't looked at the numbers very specifically because I've just been playing.
I mean,
by
I think
feel.
that's just for your champ though. Like
Right,
for
right,
mages,
right.
it's pretty bad.
No,
Because,
I'm
like,
specifically talking about Swain.
before,
Yeah.
Leandry had bonus damage instantly and the bleed.
Right.
Like there was this part of it called agony, right?
Right.
Where like based on their HP or whatever, you would deal a bit bonus insta damage. So you could play Syndra and one shot the tank because you also got bonus damage, not just damage over time.
Right.
Now you only get bonus damage once you've been in combat for a long time. So like battle mages or mages that do long fights like Cassio, Asir, Swain, Brand, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Leandry is buffed on those.
Mm-hmm.
But for more like bursting mages and stuff, it's kind of shit now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had someone else actually linked me a build that some high elo players was running on Swain. What do you think about this? Seraphs into Frozen Heart.
Yeah, I played Seraph on Swain top lane last season.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. I just don't think you need the mana. I just think it's like
I think it's
you're
just
tanky with it, but it's like fake tank. You know, like the Seraph shield
cheesy.
isn't real.
Yeah, it feels cheesy. Like, cause then you get Frozen
but
Heart, you
it's
get more
not
mana
real
stack,
because
yeah.
Seraph has no HP in itself.
I see. It's better to have actual HP because you can also regen it. Whereas the shield is just like a little bit of temporary
HP. Exactly what you said.
Okay.
The HP is more real because you can lose the 400 HP from Rylaites, heal it back up during the fight, and it'll keep applying as 400 HP. Right?
Okay.
Whereas the shield, you're required to get low, and it has a cooldown.
Okay. I'm not.
And obviously, Swain also works with health.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, I think it's not good.
Okay, I'm gonna climb now. This is I ran that build for like at least 15 games, and I guess it was almost a handicap. I guess that makes sense.
I mean, the Frozen Heart is fine.
Frozen Heart's great. I love that item.
I just don't see why the Seraph.
Yeah.
You're also like just ruining your whole build because you're playing Swain with no Rylaites then.
Yes, and I think it was mostly because the tier rush early, but I don't need to necessarily keep it. I could just sell it.
Well, if you really want a tier, you can just buy a tier.
Right. Okay, cool. I know we're deviating into some more like me being personal greed about trying to get out of plat for the first time. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking time to talk about all this stuff. I love your approach and philosophy. Obviously, I love all the work I've seen you do with a lot of the players. Do you have any, I guess, suggestions or comments for any players out there who are trying to improve? And obviously, subscribe to VeigarV2 Patreon. Great content. But any other tips or any general solo queue stuff?
Like I said before, first thing first, right, is learning how to improve because no tip you can ever be given is going to be useful, right? If you don't know that. So really like figure out how you as a person just learn. Like some people learn more from watching others rather than themselves. Others need to watch themselves. Others need to just talk about their mistakes, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's some people that really just need to bother you with a friend and like explain and discuss, right? So you got to figure out how to learn. Once you've done that, then figure out what to learn, right? Watch your games, watch them, and take accountability for your mistakes, right? Don't try to brush it up being like, if my teammate did this, my team did this, blah, 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 right? Take ownership, right?
Okay.
It's your solo queue game. You're not going to have these players next game.
Yeah.
Unless you're high elo.
And then for the high elo players, if you want to go pro, what would you recommend?
Well, also those two things, but really try to find who you are as a player, I think, because especially for mids, a lot of mids try to be somebody that they are not. Do you know who Leader is?
Yeah.
So Leader is the opposite of this. He has never tried to be somebody he's not. He is always gonna lock in Yasuo, Yone, Akali. He would lock in Sylas even in the worst Sylas game in the world. And it's like, you would rather do that than to lock in Orianna when you can't play Orianna. Right? I've seen Leaders Annie, it was not good. So it's just like, so many mids are just being like copycats of each other. And it begs the question, like, what would happen if you try to be yourself? Again, to bring up APA in this situation, right? For the NA references, APA is a good example of this, right? He will lock his Nico, he will lock his Sigs, you know?
Yeah.
He will lock these things, and yeah, maybe it is not the meta, maybe it's not thematically the best, but that is who he is, right? That is going to work good for him. And so, like, whether you're low elo or you're challenger or whatever, at the end of the day, what is meta might not be meta for you, right?
Yeah.
Like, this to me especially has always like kind of been true. Like, I've always wanted to play like Karthus mid and stuff, and it's like, yeah, it hasn't always been like good, but it wins me games.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you make these champs look utterly disgustingly broken, and they're very actually not. They're very bad.
Yeah, so it's just like,
yeah.
like Nemesis Syndra does not mean that my Syndra is good,
Right. Right.
Meanwhile, every mid laner in gold is playing Syndra thinking they're Nemesis.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're not. And they would maybe be better off playing Annie or something.
Okay. Do you
or
think...
maybe they don't like playing Annie. Maybe they like to play Fizz, but they don't want to play Fizz because Nemesis plays Syndra. But then it's like, just play your Fizz if you like to play Fizz, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hit Challenger playing Veigar only the first time I got Chal.
Yeah. Well, especially in lower elos, right? Like, you could play anything. You if you're
even
good...
in Challenger you can. If you look at Challenger ladder right now,
that's true.
Like on EU West, we have this guy called like Annie IRL.
Yes, I saw someone comment about Dragdar, I think, posted him.
Yeah, and he plays Annie every role.
That's, yeah.
He just plays Annie. For years, he just plays Annie. Every role, top lane, mid lane, support, it doesn't matter. And the guy is like Challenger, rank 2, rank 3.
That's crazy.
And it's just like, just play the game,
Yeah. Every time I think my champ is bad, I remember that there's probably 10 Challenger Swain players. Like,
yeah, throughout the world there is.
Yeah, easily. They
and
only play
you
Swain.
might be right. Your champ might be bad.
Yeah.
In comparison to others. But that just doesn't mean that you on a good champion will actually be good.
No, absolutely not. I'm actually worse. You don't want to see my Syndra. But okay, yeah, thank you so much for your time, Marius. It was really good talking to you again. Hope you guys have a great season. I'm not working with C9 this year, but I'm always going to be rooting for you guys. Love to see, Oh, I had one last question. What do you think is the difference between C9 spring, C9 summer? Because obviously you guys have a very good track record, but it always seems like you almost always win spring, and then by summer it just feels like there's sort of a downgrade shift in performance, or other teams have gotten better. What do you think it is? I'm just curious about that.
Well, I haven't actually ever thought about this trend.
It's mostly based on performance. It's mostly based on performance. It's not based on any like eyeball test. I'm just saying that historically C9 almost always gets top 2 in spring. And then in summer, it's sort of variable. I mean, they almost always make worlds, but if you look at the history of C9 championships, it's almost always spring.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about this. I mean, not sure. I mean, obviously it means that other teams have also gotten better. Like I thought NRG, the time they beat us, they ramped up super well, and they just really like realized how to play together,
Yeah.
And not sure. Maybe just at the start, the individual skill was like enough to win us things, and maybe just didn't improve enough as a team as a whole. Maybe.
Interesting. Okay.
Not sure. Like that's what it like sounds like to me, at least. Like if a team wins a lot at the start, and then they don't later, probably just means that they weren't that great of a fit as a team, maybe.
Yeah. Or I mean, it could also just be burnout too. I know winning spring comes with a lot of issues. It comes with a lot of issues because then you have to go to MSI. And
yeah, of course, you have to put in more effort too, and maybe the other teams took it easier at the start,
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck this season. I'm excited to watch the season start on the 20th. Wish you the best, and try to, get rest when you can.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thank you for this opportunity.
All right. Take care. See you, Maris.
Bye-bye.